5 minutes. Thank you.
Chairwoman, I'd like to yield my time to the ranking member of the full committee, Gregory Meeks from New York.
Okay.
Thank you, Rep. Castro. I'm tempted to, talk about our former president who impeached twice, now indicted twice, maybe indicted again for resurrection in January 6th, and the guy that is friends with Kim Jong-un. I would hope our allies don't look at that or think that is what America is. We're still a strong government, our institutions, so I'm not going to talk about that. Let me start by just saying this. Democracy in Colombia is not in peril. The people of Colombia have embraced free and fair elections for decades, even during some of the most challenging years of internal conflict. And I've been involved in Colombia since I've been here. I've been involved with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 presidents, from Pastrana, Uribe, Santos, Duque, and now Petro. And that's our job, is to deal with who the people decide they want to be their president. That's democracy. Elections. Count the votes. Don't deny them after they're counted. Count the votes, and the people decides who their president is. What would imperil Colombia, and indeed the region, are the Republican proposed cuts. Roughly 30% for our entire state foreign operations and related programs budget. These steep cuts would deeply impede our ability to provide humanitarian and development assistance at this pivotal time in Colombia. And I might add that last year we just celebrated our 200-year-long bilateral relationship, applauded free and fair elections, witnessed a peaceful transition of power, and supported the ushering in of a diverse, inclusive, and progressive administration under President Petro and Vice President Marquez. The narrative that Colombia has, quote, big problems with democracy, with its institutions, with the economy, and with President Petro's total peace policy is divisive and counterproductive, particularly when that narrative is used against his interests in negotiating with the ELN to extend peace beyond the 2016 peace accord. Colombia is a democratic country with a democratically elected government and democratic institutions and process in place. One change in policy that we may disagree with does not change our shared common values and histories. As we strive to reach common goals, we should do so in partnership. Additionally, I'm deeply concerned that withholding funding in Colombia runs contrary to the United States drug policy, security, and commercial interests. The shared challenges we have can only be addressed if we support Colombia's efforts toward lasting peace and strengthening institutions and access to justice. We must help Colombia build up civic participation and civilian services in the most rural areas, those areas where oftentimes indigenous and African Colombians live, and which Petro says he is focused on. I was there at his inauguration, and for the first time, I heard those communities talked about extensively. I heard it under President Uribe, and I heard it under President Santos also. The assistance that we provided for decades in a bipartisan fashion does just that. It competes with the drivers of illicit economies and violence to renew belief in democracy and ushers in much-needed change. What's confusing and shocking to me is watching my colleagues across the aisle complain about the influence of China and other adversaries while simultaneously proposing to no longer support our strongest allies in the region. We do not advance United States interests if we withdraw from the table, nor do we address these challenges if we shut out and deny regional stakeholders from being at the table. A peaceful future for Colombia may require dialogue with a Cuba or Venezuela, particularly when it concerns negotiation with the ELN or addressing the migration challenge head-on. Colombia is not sliding into a socialist state. I've worked closely, as I said, with every Colombian president since I was elected to Congress because I believe in the potential of the Colombian people. I've fallen in love with the Colombian people and their strife and moving for democracy. I've seen them at each one of these elections stand in line and make sure that their voices are heard with their vote. I saw it in this last election that elected Pedro. That's democracy, not someone coming from someplace else and saying that you should not be. I know that constructive dialogue and cooperation between our countries will reap benefits on both sides of our bilateral relationship. And again, I want to thank the witnesses that are here. I don't want to take up any more time from this distinguished panel, but let me just say that we've got to listen and work with our allies in the region. Not just be above them and tell them you do what we tell you to do, but let's promote those democracies and look at those things that we have in common. And what took place when President Petro came here to visit President Biden and members of Congress, he's indicated that he's willing to continue to do just that. And I yield back.